Hello everyone, welcome to part 8 of my Wrestlemania MVP LVP series, where I take a look at every Wrestlemania in history and determine who was the most valuable player and who was the least valuable player at each event. And today we've got 3 Wrestlemanias lined up, and they were ones that it was very easy to pick out an MVP for, because I feel like they all have a fairly obvious direction to go in as far as determining the MVP. These would be WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 14, and WrestleMania 12. And just listing those off, you may get an idea of who the MVP is of each of those events, or at least know exactly where my brain is going to go when observing these events. LVP, least valuable player, not quite as easy in these cases, but I was able to do something with it, so let's jump right into it. Starting with the very first WrestleMania, the event that started it all, 1985, Madison Square Garden. There were a couple different directions I could have gone with this. The most obvious way to go was the celebrities, because obviously the Rock and Wrestling connection was a really big deal, and that was the major selling point of WrestleMania. And you had celebrities that legitimately contributed to the product. Cyndi Lauper, Mr. T. They were active participants in the show and legitimately brought a lot of attention to the product. So for that end, I think they deserve a lot of credit for what they did. There were other celebrities there too, Billy Martin, Liberace, Muhammad Ali, various others, and started that tradition of WrestleMania, not just being a wrestling show, but being a spectacle, and being one where you can get celebrity guests, and all the song, dance, glitz and glamour, and all that stuff. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for the initial success of WrestleMania. My brain was also going towards Andre the Giant, who had what I felt was the first ever true WrestleMania moment when he slammed Big John Studd, won the $10,000, and started throwing the money out into the crowd, where Bobby the Weasel Heenan was able to sneak the bag away from him and run like a thief in the night, being the weasel that he is. That is one of the major highlights from the first WrestleMania. I remember seeing clips of that before even seeing the first WrestleMania, so it was just an image that was burned into my brain. So for that, I think Andre deserves a huge chunk of credit for the success of the first WrestleMania and making the first WrestleMania memorable. And the other obvious way to go would be towards the main event. I already mentioned Mr. T. You had Paul Orndorff on the heel side. He was kind of the... I don't want to sound like I'm putting Orndorff down. He was kind of the place filler there. It's like he was there because Piper needed a partner. But Orndorff would have a much bigger role to play throughout 1986 during the feud with Hogan. That was where he really got to shine. But as far as in this match, he filled the role well, but he was basically just the henchman. And ultimately would have a face turn after this, which I've been watching on my Saturday night's main event live stream. So be sure to check those out. They are a lot of fun. And obviously there's Hulk Hogan, who was the big star, the big champion, and the most heavily promoted wrestler from the company, and was used as kind of a lightning rod to bring all these celebrities in. So I think Hulk Hogan deserves a lot of credit as well for the success of WrestleMania, and many have said that he's the greatest star in WrestleMania history, because without him and the big main events that he had, not just at this show, but at all the other ones, at 3 and 5 and 6 and even years later at 18, Hogan deserves a lot of credit for the success of WrestleMania and building a foundation for the showcase of the Immortals to be built on. But if I'm going to assign an MVP for the first WrestleMania, I'm going to give it to the heel in the situation, the one that made the conflict work. I'm going to give it to Rowdy Roddy Piper, the legend himself, the Hot Rod. Now, Piper once said in WCW when he first went over there, "Hogan, do you think they would have loved you so much if they didn't hate me so much?" And that is absolutely true in this case, because in doing this Rock and Wrestling connection, you need an angle, you need a story, you need a conflict to drive everything home, give it the spark that it needs, and then make the audience want to check out the main event match at the first WrestleMania. Because you can't just have Hogan shake hands with Mr. T and just put him up against 2 random guys and just expect that to sell. Probably would have sold, but it wouldn't have been as interesting, wouldn't have been as exciting, and probably wouldn't have had the long-lasting appeal after WrestleMania if you didn't have a villain to serve as the guy that hated the Rock and wrestling connection, hated mixing in with celebrities, hated dealing with Cyndi Lauper and Mr. T and Hulk Hogan and various other things. And then on the other side, you had Hulk Hogan, who was trying to be the ambassador, trying to change the business in a positive way, create more opportunities for the boys, and make the business a better place, make the guys more money, get them more attention, and be the spokesperson of the company. So, two distinct positions. You understand where both guys are coming from. One's trying to maintain the purity of the sport. The other guy's trying to make the business better for everybody. But you get that conflict, and you get Roddy Piper kicking Cyndi Lauper in the head and doing the stuff that he did at the War to Settle the Score, which was really well done. Go back, if you haven't watched the War to Settle the Score, go back and watch it. It's really great how they executed the build-up to this WrestleMania match. And I think Piper deserves a lot of credit just for being him, just for being the villain in this whole situation and making the match interesting. And for that, I'm going to give Roddy Piper the MVP of the first WrestleMania. Now, who's going to get the least valuable player? I mean, I hate to put the guy down, and I really hate to compare somebody to their father, but David Sammartino, who had a match on this card against Brutus Beefcake, which was not a bad match. It's not like it was a terrible match or anything, but you look at it, and you just go, David is not a star. He is not his dad. And I know the living legend Bruno Sammartino is a huge shadow, and trying to make a name for yourself while living under that shadow is very hard. But you watch this match, especially the post-match where Bruno did a run-in and the crowd went crazy. You knew who the star was, and you knew who was just kind of the guy that was put onto the card because of his name. And again, I don't want to put the guy down too much, but David did not have the most stellar career following this match, and just didn't have enough of a spark to him to help him stand up on his own. Not the way his dad did. And granted, there aren't how many guys in the history of wrestling are as charismatic and as beloved as his father was? So, again, it's a huge, huge reputation to live up to, and unfortunately, David wasn't able to do it. One of those unfortunate things. So just for being this unremarkable guy on a card that was full of remarkable people, like Tito Santana, like Rick Valentine, like Junkyard Dog, like Ricky Steamboat, like Andre the Giant, Big John Studd, Hulk Hogan, Mr. T, Roddy Piper, Paul Orndorff, Jimmy Snuka had his role in the main event. All these guys that left some kind of an impression, and David left almost nothing. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So, from there, we go from the very first WrestleMania to the one that kind of was kind of the signature WrestleMania of the Attitude Era. I know a lot of people love 17 and consider that to be the best WrestleMania, but I think 14 is the one that brought the magic back to WrestleMania, but in a completely different way. The post-Hogan years, and even towards the end of the Hogan years, like WrestleMania was kind of fading. But WrestleMania 14 came back with a vengeance and a whole new attitude, if you will, for the WWF, and that really brought a spark to the company, and you could just sense it. Like, if you look at WrestleMania 13, minus the submission match, and look at everything else on that card, and it's kind of a dead show with no intrigue, and then you look at WrestleMania 14, it's almost like a complete metamorphosis, complete 180, from where they were in 97 to where they are in 98, and it's a way more exciting product, way more interesting, with better characters, better storylines, better booking, and just more fun all around. Now, MVP, fairly obvious one, I would say. I mean, there are some runner-ups. I felt like Undertaker and Kane had the best match on the show. I've praised that match like nobody's business. I felt like both guys played their roles to perfection in this match. It's one of my personal favorite Undertaker matches. I would put it at number 2, only behind the Hell in a Cell with Shawn. So that gives you an idea of how much I really, really like Taker and Kane at WrestleMania 14. And but even though they had the best match, I felt like the main event was really kind of the star attraction of the show. You had 3 names in there. You had Shawn Michaels, who was retiring, but had to put over Austin, and went in there with an injured back to put over Austin. There are all the stories, with Taker sitting at Gorilla to make sure that Shawn did the job cleanly and didn't fuck around like he normally did back in those days. But he went in there hurt. He put Austin over and did the right thing, and didn't get the most glorious send off, but he did do the right thing and did right by the company and by Austin, who was the big star at that point. Then there was Mike Tyson, who was the big celebrity attraction, and arguably the greatest use of a celebrity in the history of pro wrestling. I mean, the stuff they did leading into WrestleMania with Mike Tyson was some of their best stuff ever. I think to the first showdown between Austin and Tyson. I think to the segment where Tyson was revealed to be a member of DX, which was amazing. I mean, that was so well done. And the promo between Shawn and Tyson, it's like, after WrestleMania, who will be the baddest man on the planet? I will, Heartbreak. And what's going to happen if Stone Cold gets in your way? I'm going to knock him the fuck out. Who will, after WrestleMania, who will be the showstopper? You will, Heartbreak. That whole bit was amazing. And if you can find footage of it, I'm sure it's on the network somewhere. I mean, goddamn, you got to watch it. It's just great stuff. But he was the enforcer in this match, and being aligned with Shawn Michaels, that put a huge, lightning rod of attention on him. It was like, oh my god, is he going to screw Austin? Is he going to, what's Tyson going to do? Ultimately, he was just there to count the 3, and he wasn't going to screw Austin at all. It was all a ruse. He wasn't aligned with DX at all. But, still, he brought a lot of excitement to the proceedings and made the main event feel larger than life. In a main event that had probably the greatest worker in the history of the business in Shawn Michaels, and who was a stellar heel at that point in time, and Steve Austin, who was just waiting to explode and become the biggest star in the business. He just needed that title win. They could have had a main event on their own, but I think Mike Tyson added that extra little flavor, that extra X factor that put it over the top and made it one of the most interesting WrestleMania main events of all time. But save the best for last. The true MVP of WrestleMania 14, it goes to Stone Cold Steve Austin, the guy that was the icon of the Attitude Era, had come on strong to completely redefine the babyface role for professional wrestling. And like I said, all he needed was to win the title, and he did. And as JR said, the Austin Era has begun, and it was the start of something truly special and the start of something truly exciting. And Austin needed to be the guy in that spot. He deserved to be the guy in that spot, and the fans wanted him to be in that spot, most importantly. And everything clicked, everything worked, and it was just great all around, and it was Austin's night to be crowned the champion, and then move on to bigger things as he would have the feud of a lifetime with Vince McMahon, the defining feud of the Attitude Era, in my opinion. But yeah, MVP, no question. For WrestleMania 14, it is Stone Cold Steve Austin all the way. Now, who's the least valuable player from this show? I am going to give it to the Truth Commission. Do you remember who the Truth Commission is? Probably not. I don't blame you if you don't. They were a weird group that were brought in 97, I believe. They were supposed to be South American mercenaries. Okay. And at this point, they were being led by Don Callis, the Jackal, which was the character he would later adopt. And he would actually also bring in the Acolytes as well, before I think Don Callis got let go, and then they gave the Acolytes to the Undertaker and to the Ministry of Darkness and that whole thing. But yeah, so the South American mercenary group, they were entered into the Tag Team Battle Royal, and at this point they'd had a split with the Jackal, and Kurgan, who was this big interrogator, who you may remember from several movies. I know he was in the Sherlock Holmes film, gets into a fight with Sherlock Holmes, played by Robert Downey Jr., he was also in 300. He was the big monster that was chained up and that, like, in the middle of the movie, and he gets unleashed and gets into a big fight with Leonidas. So Kurgan had some movie roles and everything, so he's found a place for himself after pro wrestling. Great look. Couldn't work worth a lick, but, you know, he did look great. And was in a long line of big, scary dudes that couldn't get over or didn't work or were booked into oblivion or whatever, and was ultimately given a dance gimmick, because that's something that Vince loves to do. It's like, if you're a big guy that doesn't get over, they will give you a dance gimmick. Vladimir Kozlov, the Funkasaurus, Albert, like, several times. Like, 2 or 3 times they gave Albert a dance gimmick. So, it's just something they do. It's just something they do. And Rosie, remember, he was in 3 Minute Warning, was scary as hell. Then he joins up with the Hurricane, which I guess isn't necessarily a dance gimmick, but he did the superhero bit with the Hurricane, which they were basically dancing fools, right? But anyway, I've talked way more about the Truth Commission than any video about WrestleMania should ever mention the Truth Commission. But basically, they were in this tag team battle royal. Jacqueline Kurgan cost them the tag team battle royal, and nobody cared about anything that they did. Nobody cared about the angle. Nobody cared about the group. And the only things anybody cared about in that tag team battle royal were the returning Road Warriors who got a makeover. They were LOD 2000, and it was cool to have them back. And Sunny was their manager, who was the other thing that everybody cared about, because Sunny looked hot as hell at that point. And that outfit she was wearing, holy Moses. I am shocked she didn't have any wardrobe malfunctions wearing that outfit. But good Lord, she looked amazingly beautiful at that point in time. And yeah, everyone liked that. But Truth Commission, not so much. So, Truth Commission, they get my least valuable player of WrestleMania 14. Now, let's wrap this up with WrestleMania 12, which might have the most obvious MVP of all. You know, and this is a show that had some good things on it. You know, opening six-man was pretty good. I thought Taker and Diesel was a pretty good match. I thought Roddy and Goldust was an absolute, just a three-ring circus of insanity and was a lot of fun to watch. Bret Hart did amazingly well in the main event. A main event that, by the way, at the time it happened, and in the years that followed, everybody said it was the greatest match of all time. And I was like, well, it's really good. It's great, but I wouldn't put it up there as like one of my favorites, like number one of all time, even out of the first 12 WrestleManias. I was like, no, I kind of liked Hogan Warrior more, and no, I kind of like Piper Brett more from a few years ago, and I kind of like the ladder match more, and Bret Noah and Steamboat and Savage and those type of things. But yeah, I always thought the Iron Man match was very good. It just wasn't like my number one favorite like it was for a lot of other people. And now in recent years, a lot of people say it's overrated and say that it actually sucked. So now I find myself having to defend the match. I think for an hour-long match, I think it's very well paced. I think it's very well put together. I can recall specific moments from that match, which is hard to do in an hour-long match. You know, the spot where Jose Lothario gets knocked down and Shawn super kicks someone at ringside by mistake, and I think it was the timekeeper, and various other, especially in the closing minutes, like a lot of the drama that was going on towards then. The sharpshooter spot at the end and everything, which was a great use of the lock him in a submission hold until time runs out. In this case, it made sense because Bret knew, it's like, look, it doesn't matter if he taps or not, I'm just draining time. Because if it's a draw, I keep the belt, right? Because he didn't know he was going to be forced into overtime. So that was actually a really good finish to regulation. But anyway, I thought the match was very good. Thought it was great. Bret deserves a lot of the credit for it, and not many guys could have pulled that match off as well as he did. But MVP, it's got to go to the Heartbreak Kid, the showstopper, the headliner, the main event, Shawn Michaels, who had an amazing entrance at WrestleMania this year. One of the most remarkable WrestleMania entrances of all time is he did the zip line from the catwalk at the top of the building and zip line down into the audience. I was like, that looked really cool and looks great in highlight packages. And yeah, so obviously the entrance was great, the match was great. I already put it over, but the real reason he's the MVP is because, as Vince said, the boyhood dream has come true for Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels wins the belt after being with the company for so long, wins the championship. He's the number one guy. He's the WWF champion. It was his night. It was his crowning moment, and it went off very well. I thought it was executed well. The match was great, and Shawn got the belt that he deserved, despite the fact that some people might say he was a prick back then, but you can't deny talent. The cream rises to the top, and I think Shawn deserved to be in that spot. So, great stuff all around, great main event, and the title change put it over the top as one of those historic moments, and Shawn Michaels gets the MVP from me for WrestleMania 12. Now, least valuable player for WrestleMania 12. I could go for Warrior or Triple H, but to be perfectly honest, like a minute and a half match where he doesn't sell anything, I mean, that's like how you present the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, it's the best way to present him, right? Especially if you're reintroducing him. I don't know if Triple H is the guy I would have used for that spot. I wouldn't have used a mid-carder with some potential, and I believe he was undefeated up to that point. I wouldn't have used him for that spot, but you know, I felt like the match as far as reintroducing Warrior goes, it was like that was pretty much exactly what they... I mean, that was probably the best way to reintroduce the Warrior, to be perfectly honest. And also, Triple H did fine after that, so, you know, he had a career after that happened. It didn't kill him. you know. And so I'm going to be nice and let that match have a pass. The thing I'm going to give least valuable player to is, and I don't mean to put the guy down, I think he's a really solid hand, really solid worker, but I'm going to give it to Savio Vega. And the only reason I'm doing that is because the least remarkable match on the entire card was Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Savio Vega. It was the one that was least worth talking about. It was the one that left the least of an impression by the time the show was over. And Austin was still kind of finding himself. He was still aligned with Ted DiBiase. I believe he had dropped the Ringmaster moniker by this point, but he was still kind of the Ringmaster, and he's trying to grow into Stone Cold Steve Austin. And Savio Vega was kind of one of those guys, I don't want to say jobber to the stars, but he was like a lower tier mid-card guy that was used to largely put over guys at big shows when needed to. And he would actually go on to have a really good Caribbean strap match with Steve Austin at Beware of Dog 2. You know, for those of you wondering what happened to be at Beware of Dog 1, you know, go look that up. That's an interesting story unto itself. But, you know, so they would have a really good match after WrestleMania, but I felt like this match was just kind of filling space and just a way to showcase Steve Austin. The most remarkable thing about this match is that it is the WrestleMania debut of Stone Cold Steve Austin, which wasn't remarkable at the time because none of us knew that Austin was going to become the big star that he ultimately became. So it has historical significance because of that one thing. It's Austin's WrestleMania debut, but didn't have a whole lot going for it other than that. It was just not a terrible match. It was just a very unremarkable one, and Savio was just the guy that was in there to lose to Steve Austin. Like I said, they would have much better matches than this one at WrestleMania, unfortunately, but Savio was just the least remarkable part of the show. Of what was a good WrestleMania, so you know, it's kind of hard picking out least valuable players from all three of these shows because there wasn't a whole lot on all three shows that I disliked. So that made it kind of tough, but I got to do it. I said I would do it, and I'm going to do it. So there you go. But that is all I have for this one. That concludes part 8 of the series. Next week, I'm going to try and knock out parts 9 and 10 and hopefully squeeze 11 out as well. But that is all I have for you now. Y'all enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you all later.